why I don't leave them at the canvas position.
No, I did this last time as well. It's stable now. That's why I took the laptop.
Yeah, please.
Amrit?
One voice is missing, so we're just waiting on. Okay, is everyone ready? Okay, I welcome you to the quarterfinals of the IIT Bombay Debate 2016. I congratulate all teams for making it thus far and call the Prime Minister to open the case that stands in their name. Hear, hear. You can tell.
Members of the House, we tell you that what makes a soldier is the conviction within them that tells them I need to prioritize a collective good over myself. We tell you that this situation is no different. Our move is simple, right? We think even while soldiers are trained in the army, they are told that there is a huge possibility you may be killed at the front lines. There is a possibility you will not make it out of this incursion, out of this battle. We think the kind of briefing and training we are going to give the soldiers in this move is no different. Again, the underlying theme is that prepare to die for your country, right? You may come upon the situation where you will have to sacrifice yourself. And on side OG, we're going to tell you why the sacrifice is so essential. I'm going to characterize for you the kind of areas in which hostage taking takes place, right? We think you have two main actors. We think you have states and we think you have these non-state actors. We think these kind of hostage taking areas are ones where you have a kind of de facto rule of these non-state actors. You have the Al-Shabaab in Somalia, you have Boko Haram in Nigeria. We think it's not so much us versus them, but the situation is far more fractured, right? You have literally two warring parts of the country that are disrupting civilian life. And these kind of situations happen in places where state institutions are extremely weak. Where the state cannot look after its civilians, and where the state army then becomes a very prominent extension of the state itself. Because we think in these kind of areas, the state army is the only one with the might to battle these kind of non-state actors. And why do we say that, right? We think these kind of non-state actors, firstly, their power is extremely isolated, right? They have their own area of command, they get their own supply of arms and whatnot. We think they institute a kind of rule where they are the ruling government within their area. But more importantly, we think the kind of places where they take rule are also ones where the state finds it extremely difficult to penetrate and make sure that these people go away, right? And in that kind of scenario, we don't think that any sort of information leakage towards these non-state actors is justified or is acceptable, right? Because we tell you that when you have enemies who use extraordinary means to defeat you, who are using extraordinary means to scare and build peer into the very hearts of your citizens, you need all the advantages that you can get. And we tell you, like, very simply how these kind of non-state actors use hostages to take advantage of the state, right? We think things like terrain, knowledge of terrain, we think things like troop movements, these are the kind of things that become the difference between many lives lost or many lives not lost in these kind of situations, right? We think two things. That when these non-state actors get hostages, they're able to avoid state capture, or they're able to plan more attacks precisely because they know the concentration of troops in which area, or where troops are moving from where to where, right? We think this debate starts when you take it as a certainty that these soldiers are going to get captured, from where you have two choices, right? Because we think that if this non-state actor does not take that soldier as a hostage, that soldier is necessarily going to die. Because we think that if you have no use for a soldier as a hostage, you have no use for that soldier alive at all, right? But let's characterize like what we mean by certain death and what we mean by a hostage situation, right? We think the nature of these non-state actors is that they want to make a spectacle of everything, right? They love visibility, and that's the kind of thing we see in ISIS, right? Even the kind of deaths that you deliver to journalists, to undercover operatives in the ISIS are like beheadings with huge silver swords, they're extremely macabre, and we think it's rife with indignity, right? We don't think as a state it's fair to expect our soldiers to stay silent while belligerents physically and psychologically turn their insides out. We don't think we should do that as a state, right? But we think even when these people take hostages, they use cruel and extraordinary means of torture, right? We think things like nail ripping, which has been reported, waterboarding, like slowly scarring their faces and their bodies. And we don't think these soldiers are special operatives, right? We don't think they're intelligence agents who have been trained to like withstand these huge amounts of torture. We think they are vulnerable to pain, and we think they are vulnerable to giving information to these terrorists. But even if they don't give this information to the terrorists, even if the love of their nation or whatever is so strong within them that forces them to remain silent, we think it's extremely cruel of the state to like expect the soldier to do that for us when instead we have the alternative, when instead we can allow some mercy to the fate of the soldier, which we know is going to be scarred for them. Yes?
Would you sign up for the army knowing that the state is not going to protect you from harm?
Yes, we think so, because we think that even like at the front lines, you know that the state can't do anything once the bullet has entered your body, right? You are signing up for that possibility of death. We don't really think that changes in our scenario. That's something we're trying to show you from side opening government, right? We think that possibility remains the same because you know that once you are at the front lines, the state can't really prevent you dying, can't really prevent you from stepping into a landmine and your body blowing up. But that is precisely why you sign up for the army, right? Because you believe that there are some things that are worth doing even when there is that kind of possibility of death. So what have we told you from side OG, right? We've told you that like soldiers themselves sign up for the army precisely because they prioritize this kind of collective good over themselves. And we tell you that this isn't so different, this move isn't so different from status quo, in which soldiers have that kind of knowledge that this is a situation that I am willingly going into. I know that there is a possibility of death. What we've told you is that these non-state actors employ extremely cruel means of torture, extremely visceral ways of taking life. And we don't think as a state, we owe it to our soldiers to make sure that they don't suffer that kind of indignity of death. Because we also tell you that what a part of being a soldier is also suffering a dignified death, right? Suffering a dignified death in the service of your country. We think when soldiers also sign up for the army, they also sign up for the idea that when I die, it will be patriotic. Right? When I die, there will be some glory in my death. I will not die after having given up the secrets of my state to a belligerent. I will not die after all my fingernails have been plucked out by the state. We think the state deserves to afford that kind of luxury to the soldier. We don't think the state should expect the soldier to undergo all this kind of torture, all this kind of mental pressure. We think that these non-state actors have to be taken seriously. We don't think information leakages are at all acceptable. We are proud to do this.
I thank the speaker for her speech and invite the leader of opposition to open the case for the opposition bench. Hear, hear.
Speaker, we believe that the state has a duty to protect the citizens who they put at the utmost risk. We think that when you, as a citizen, make the ultimate sacrifice of putting your life on the line for the state, for what the state requires you to do, we think that the state has the duty of protecting you in that regard, right? Because and that is something which is a duty at all costs. We think that that's a primary duty. We think that soldiers are recruited and armies exist not because life is expendable, not because you can just throw people under the bus because we want to go to war, but in fact the idea that we can gain a strategic advantage, but in fact the idea that we can in fact triumph the enemy and come back safe and keep our homeland safe, right? We don't think that armies are conscripted because certain human lives are expendable, because that's the message you send out from inside government. We think that at a moral level, therefore, what the state does is an abdication of absolute responsibility, where the state says that we don't care if you are captured, we don't care because we will not rescue you, we will not, your life isn't even worth the ransom that they are demanding, we will just throw you under the bus. We think that it is exceptionally problematic when the state does that. So what did opening government tell you? The opening government told you that you need to do that because there will be a strategic advantage to the enemy in terms of how they will, in terms of either they will know state secrets, or there will be ransom, or they will probably know movement of troops. Now, first thing, guard better against that, right? You have strategies in terms of how these non-state actors behave, what they do, and especially and this is where we're talking about an area which is an area where hostage taking is a tactic. You know that these are strategies that are going to be employed. You know that that is the modus operandi of this non-state actor. In that scenario, first thing you do is that you guard better in that scenario. Second thing you do is that you prepare soldiers to not give these secrets out. You have that kind of rigorous training before they are put onto the battlefield to, in fact, not release these secrets out. But more importantly, we think you also have a robust rescue mission operation. We think that multiple instances exist where people have been rescued and hostage situations have been placated, right? One example that I will give you is George H.W. Bush. Bush Sr. was captured and then came back and became president, Mr. Speaker. We think that it is important to understand that all of their argumentation in terms of the fact that the person is vulnerable to pain, that you want to rid them of torture, we think that all of that understanding pales in comparison to the fact that the person A is still alive, that person still has the hope of coming back, the person still has the hope of seeing their family and leading a better life, even if that means that I have to go for counseling sessions 5 years after I'm back in my hometown, right? We think that at any point in time, for government bench to win this debate, they have to prove that rescue missions are absolutely impossible, A, and B, that human life is something which is so expendable and the value of that individual soldier is so little that we will not even pay $1 million for you when we send you out in dangerous places, when we send you out in places where you are left on your own. We think that is absolutely morally abhorrent for them to run this idea of collective good, where this collective good is something which people only do because they know that the state has their back. People sign up, and this brings me to the second argument about why people won't sign up. Why I sign up for the army is, yes, of course, there is an element of national pride. There is an element where I think that I owe a duty to the state. But do I think that I owe this duty to the extent that anything happens to me, come what may, I will give my life up, I will put myself into the worst of situations? No. I think the idea is that I will do that, but the idea is that somebody will have my back. Somebody will come back and rescue me. My battalion is there for me my battalion is there to protect me. There are so many instances where people, where they see that their soldiers, their fellow comrades are under attack and they kill the enemy soldier, they brutally massacre them because of the idea that they know that their comrades, their fellow soldiers, their juniors, if they are generals, are people who need to be protected. Not to mention the idea, and this is something which government mentions once again, will conscription happen in this? Because, Mr. Speaker, here's the word you need to imagine. This is a situation where there are dangerous terrains. There are terrains which probably you don't understand and you require field expertise. In that scenario, do you also want these battalions to be entirely on their own, without any kind of support, without any kind of hope that that soldier has of coming back if there is an adversity? Because we think that even in the worst of adversities that these people would be put in, there is hope in terms of them being rescued. We think that multiple rescue missions in Iraq against the ISIS in Africa do in fact succeed. In fact, there have been states which have paid ransom for people to come back and then crippled their money bases, crippled their economic supply in order for them to not benefit from the ransom that they've gotten. So we don't think that that harm is something they can run with. But more importantly, and this question entirely ignored by opening government, is one where why should I kill my friend? I ate breakfast with him in the morning and now I have to go and kill him. We think that people suffer PTSD when they kill enemy soldiers. People suffer great amounts of trauma, and we think that's what closing government will also run in terms of how that person goes through a moral conundrum or goes through a traumatic experience when they are in that hostage situation. We think that if PTSD is something which they accept, and if PTSD is something which is in fact a reality, when you in fact kill absolute strangers 7 oceans away from you, we think that if you have to kill somebody who is your friend, we think that the kind of trauma is something which you cannot reconcile with. The kind of moral conundrum that you will be put in at that time when you are holding that trigger is something which you cannot ever recover from. And that's why we put this against a rigorous military training, a rigorous training where you're told to look out for each other, where you are in an environment where your battalion is everything, where your general looks after you. We think all of this means, and finally, Mr. Speaker, we think that you will never have any risky missions because this senior of yours, this battalion chief, will know that the risk of putting you in there is so absolutely horrible that it's best to leave out. It's best to step away. It's best to never engage in that. We think for all of these reasons, it's a really bad idea to do this. Very proud of
We thank the Speaker for his speech and invite the Deputy Prime Minister to refer to the case on the government bench. Right here.
Can I get water? Is it water anywhere? Did you get water, man?
Yeah. Thank you. I just fill it in.
You want to wait for it?
I'm going to talk to you about the kind of states that we are talking about and why a civil war is essentially different from fighting against another state or sending troops to another country like George W. Bush. Why we think that their case was extremely rich, given that we have characterized to you the kind of states that we are talking about, where these crises actually take place, where there's actually civil strife, where there's actually so much division within the state and the non-state actors within the boundaries of that state that you can't possibly know who's really on your side and who isn't. Right? Beginning with my rebuttals. So they talk about how the state won't protect you and how that disincentivizes soldiers from joining the military in the first place because they see it as an application of responsibility. Understand that in Somalia, where people don't have money, don't have the education to get any other skill except to perhaps join the military, because guess what is the most prosperous sector in that country, which is so strife-torn that hotels get bombs. And the kind of
violence is of the scale that you cannot imagine, that makes the security industry one of the most prosperous industries. The only viable option for these untrained human capital is to go out and take up jobs in the military or as security guards. They understand the opportunity cost of their job as being death in any situation whatsoever, given that they're out there placing themselves in the line of fire. We think that it's really rich of them to say that they are not going to, because they're going to value the right to life or whatever more than providing food for their family, providing for every kind of facility that they don't get in real life. They're not going to choose malnutrition and starvation over a viable job option which is going to pay for a limited amount of time, and they accept that they will get an income for some time, some part of time, and that is something that we feel that would be amenable for them. Secondly, on the idea of abdication of responsibility. Firstly, we don't know how you can treat them to guard better, because we're talking about countries which don't have resources, which the UN has to send in troops from all other countries to protect, to fight their wars for them. There are countries like Sudan, where there's like a literally de facto state existing in Sudan, 2 of them actually, wherein the UN is actually like sanctioning troops from other countries to go in and like provide them with training, because they don't have the resources anymore to train these people and to actually like provide this kind of protection that they talk about. And the ideas of how soldiers can be trained to not give out intelligence. The thing is, you can't condition anybody to not feel pain. It's one of those things that you will feel if your nails are being pulled out and you want people to stop doing that. You are willing to go to any extent to stop with the torture, because you don't know of stuff. Ashra has characterized to you, intelligence is really important, and to have an organized and a really compact military to make the most of your resources, you have to ensure that there are no leakages whatsoever from this system. Because guess what? When you're operating within your state, where the guerrilla people, people who are fighting the war from the other side, non-state actors, know the country as well as you do, or know that part of the state better than you do, then any leakage, any kind of strategic information that you have given to your troops, whether it is about your location or the kind of strategy that you're going to pursue, is going to be known to the civilians as well the moment something like this happens, because these people run in with the civilians. Al-Shabaab is like socializes with civilians in villages in Somalia, right? The military doesn't have the kind of access that Al-Shabaab has to those villages, and in these situations we need the troops to not give out any information whatsoever, because guess what? Even one location is revealed and one of like 5 camps all across the country is going to be destroyed, which is not a cost that a country which is as cash-strapped as the one that we're describing can afford to take. On the idea of hoping of coming back, when they talk about George W. Bush, it's so funny, because you don't have resources for education and health, and you don't have a military that is standing, but you're going to get psychiatrists from somewhere to like and give them to these people for free, as if these resources are available in like a third world country which is trying to somehow gain legitimacy for the government that has been elected. And on the idea of the kind of state actors that are being the governments, the one source of legitimacy that these governments have with the civilians who might just support the other side, say the FARC, say the Al-Shabaab, say any other terrorist group, is to protect them or to give them more resources. But when you are so strife-torn, when these people say that we are going to give you that security, the military has to somehow assert the fact that we are better than them because we are more organized than them, and if you support us, we are going to take away this poverty from you. You do not have to conform to some really some really out-of-the-world Islamic ideology in order to gain that legitimacy. We are going to give you a state which is better than this, and the only way they have to prove it is by being effective in these attacks. We feel that you are undermining the very importance of intelligence, of the fact that these soldiers understand and consent to the kind of situation that they're opting into the moment they join the army, because of the circumstances that they are coming from. When you say stuff like they are going to get counseling, or you can train them to not feel pain without providing any reason as to where they're going to get the resources for how they're not going to feel pain. Yeah.
If soldiers are so expensive, why don't you skip the training, give them an AK-47 and say go fight?
Where would you get the AK-47s from? The point is that you are getting these resources from, or training, or whatever assistance that you are getting from abroad, and whatever minimal resources you have are being invested into say this army. The point of this being that there are two things that inspire soldiers to join army. The first is that they're going to get a regular source of income, and the second is that I identify with the state and I see why a democracy is better, which is also a part of the reason. And we think that it is better and easier to train them in telling them that it's okay for you to make the compromise of your comrade's life, rather than going out there and becoming a hostage and giving up the right to dignity that we think that you do have. And that is the one thing that we can actually ensure, rather than the counseling that you're talking about afterwards, which is not going to be guaranteed, which is not something that is essentially going to improve your life. We think that even if you do survive after this, you're not going to be the same person. We do not think we can provide you with the facilities that is going to make you the same person. And in that, we think that your comrades or you yourself, when in that position, when there is no scope for you to be rescued and be recovered in the condition that you are now, it is okay for you to pull the trigger, firstly for national security, because we have described to you why intelligence is so important, and secondly because we cannot guarantee to you the right to dignity afterwards. And we think that soldiers understand the compromise that they are making, and they are willing to make that compromise for the income that we are offering them, for the training that we are offering them, and that is the protection that they need, and that is the protection that makes them join the army in the first place.
I thank the speaker for his speech and invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to further the case for the opposition bench. Hear, hear.
OG's case now has dwindled down to life's so shit for them that they end up joining the security infrastructure, i.e. the army. So it's okay to dispose of soldiers because we can save on nutrition costs. It's okay to dispose of them because it's too expensive to have them. If you're really that poor, I think the first step that you should do is try not to go to war. If you're really that bad, and if you are really so hungry, I think the first focus of the state is to not go to war. And secondly, given that you have so few people signing up for the army, given that you already have reduced numbers of soldiers, either because they're malnutrition and die before they ever sign up, or more likely that they don't believe in you and like barely sign up. We think it's important to tell them that we're here to protect. Why does the state protect, and what are the consequences of the moral standards that Gujju said in this debate? The reason why most journalists in Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iraq right now are from the Western world is because the kind of investigative journalism that they do puts their lives at risk. Sure, journalists like the kind of work they're doing. Sure, they think that they're going to solve a larger problem and they're going to bring world peace if they show Boko Haram's crimes in Nigeria, or if they show the kind of atrocities Taliban is committing, or ISIS in Syria. They also realize that their life is at risk. As much as I love my work, I love my family more. But I realize that there is a higher duty to national peace and freedom of press. So I press myself into duty and go into those situations. What happens when I go into those situations, and what is the incentive structure for me to go into those situations? I know, no matter what happens, no matter what jail or what crime I'm accused of in Egypt/Pakistan, Sushma Swaraj will come and have a Twitter rant and get me out within the next 5 days. The idea is that you've been conditioned to accept that you're part of a brotherhood that is so strong that it will get you out no matter what. Forget journalists. The main theme running along almost all battalions across the army in most developed nations is a sense of family, is a sense of brotherhood. You leave your family to join a new one, because the new family that you have in your battalion, the people you eat breakfast with, the people you share toilets with, the people you share your meals with, all of those people become your family. They are the people who are going to protect you no matter what. When you say cover me when I go into a particular zone, you trust them that they're going to cover you and not let you go the moment you are captured. What are the consequences of not adhering to this moral standard? Infiltration is going to be reduced because generals are less likely to push their battalions into force when they know that they're more likely to be killed by one of their own. It's simply because the risk is so high. The reason infiltration exists, the reason you're able to, CIA is able to put up a spy center in another tap Angela Merkel's phone, is they know that even if the CIA head is caught, the worst thing that can happen to him is he will be pushed back into the US. He will not rot in a jail in Germany. Which means you're allowed to infiltrate, you're allowed to feel that you're safe when you're infiltrating, and you know that someone's got your back. What OG had to prove in today's debate is the cost of me somehow getting, I'll come to why training for, why there is existent training that stops you from giving up secrets when you're captured, and I'll come to that in just a bit. But the idea is that they have to justify today's debate why this cost of the soldier may or may not give up his secrets, state secrets, or end up calling it a ransom, is enough to justify someone from your own to kill him. Because let's understand this, the person who's killing him is not a random dude 7 oceans away. He's the guy who's going to have to go to the wife of the person he just killed and hand over his belongings to them. Can you imagine the kind of stress that you are putting that soldier through, not only when he has to make this decision of killing his own brother/sister, but of delivering those belongings to his wife, because guess what? They come from the same neighborhood, because guess what? They became the closest of friends while in service. The idea that you're tormenting soldiers to either make bad or to make calls that put them in stress, or at worst, they don't make the call at all. And in which case, if you are you're not likely to kill your soldier anyway, this move is ineffective. But what's the problem in scenarios where it becomes a state prioritization to not save your soldiers? What happens when the state tells you it's okay to kill someone who is captured? A, you're being paternalistic. You're taking a call on their behalf that they don't want to be tortured. We think it's okay for the soldiers to choose to lose all their nails and all their limbs in order to see their family one last time. I think it's a call that you leave up to the soldier and not you. And we believe there is enough training right now where soldiers are trained not to give up secrets. Especially when you're pushing soldiers into high-risk areas, the focus should be on hardening them before sending them out, which takes away most of the costs that Uji was trying to tell you in this debate. Because we believe that training is a better prioritization than saying that we will not protect you. What's your case?
How to train someone to undergo waterboarding short of violating human rights and putting them through waterboarding yourself?
If you want to go to war in an area where waterboarding is a technique, we already do simulations for soldiers before pushing them into service there. Like for example, we show images of death before pushing anybody into war. Like that's basic Army Training 101, where you prepare them for situations that they're likely to encounter. If not actual waterboarding, you're being told the effects of it, and at best you're being drowned in a swimming pool to simulate the effects. The idea is that simulation is a very real training tactic currently used by the state. Right? So what happens when you have a state that tells you that it's okay to kill one of your own? Not only do military generals not want to push their battalions into service, people who do end up killing your brothers, as much as everybody knows that he had no other choice, will be treated as the black sheep within that battalion because they have killed one of their own. As much as the army general told him to kill that person because of whatever compromise, the idea continues to pervade within the minds of soldiers that there is a child that we could have rescued. When you take the call before the point at which any rescue operations can ever be taken up, we think that the morale of the soldiers is more likely to be shifting towards, oh, but we could have done X, Y, Z to save him. And it's true, because we can do X, Y, Z to save him, and you killed him before you explored any of those options, which is not the greatest thing. Last thing, and on what Oji was trying to say. Oji was trying to say we need soldiers to sacrifice for the collective. Soldiers are already sacrificing for the collective. But the reason you have conscription is because not enough soldiers are signing up to go to war to fulfill the kind of desires or to fulfill the kind of state progress that you need. If you have resorted to conscription because current standards aren't enticing enough soldiers to sign, or enough citizens to sign up, you are forcing them to sign up and telling them we will not protect you. Not only is this morally abhorrent, it's most likely to cause backlash and conscription like never before, which sabotages your ability to go to war in and of itself. Come back to the journalist example. If journalists know they're not going to be protected, New York Times won't push their reporters into service, and reporters are more likely to backlash when their editor asks them to. We think states lose their ability to infiltrate deeper into the networks that need to be infiltrated most. And unless we stop them at their roots where it's the most dangerous, we will never overcome the larger war. For all those reasons, we're proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for his speech and invite member of government to open the closing half of this debate. Here.
Mr. Speaker, the first thing we need to realize in this debate that a soldier being captured is an extremely bad situation in itself. Here, the alternative choice is not between either killing the soldier or letting him lead a happy life. It is between killing the soldier right now or subjecting him to a life of torture and a pain and a very real possibility of him being killed at a later stage, dying an undignified death. And that is the relevant context for this debate. From slide closing, government will be bringing out to you 3 extensions which are unique. First, we'll tell you what is the metric for making this evaluation between 2 competing interests. Second, we'll tell you why the captured soldier should not be made a relevant determinant in such a bad situation. And thirdly, we'll tell you how the strategic interest lies heavily on our side. So let me come to a few rebuttals before that. The first one that they made was that this will impact the morale of the army and potential recruits. And we don't agree completely with side opening government because we believe that this Somali example is relevant for a very narrow context. However, what we do believe is that if we ask ourselves what are the motivations of soldiers who decide to sign up, right? Because let's try to understand. A person who has an overriding concern for his own life will never willingly run into a barrage of bullets. What motivates a soldier to sign up and take that risk is some greater factor. It's not need, but it is a desire to serve the country and sacrifice for the country, right? And also talk about the kind of recruits that would come about if they simply think, if they simply think that, well, I as an army, my life is the foremost factor that is relevant to me. Because let us talk about what a soldier is told the first time that he enters an army, right? He says first the country, next your battalion, next anybody else around you, any civilians you can save, and if you have anything left, then you care for your own life, right? That is the kind of message that attracts people to join the army. And if they simply say that, well, there's a problem with conscription, and now even more people are less likely to want to voluntarily come and more people will have to be conscripted, let us try to understand that the kind of message that we'll be sending out is not that we're leaving you high and dry. We'll be sending out a very clear message that yes, you are faced with 2 bad options, where it's not as if the alternative is to let you lead a happy life and we are interfering with that. We are saving you. It's more of a mercy death, where we are saving you from the indignities, from the torture and the extreme pain that you will be subjected to. And we don't believe that that's going to impact the morale of the army or new recruits, right? Secondly, they tell you that the message that they will send is that the soldier's life is not worth it. And we told you why that's not likely to occur. Because here the comparative is different. But more importantly, they give you the example how a soldier knows that Sushma Swaraj will come and rescue him when he knows he's in jail. But let's try to understand. This motion is set in a context of a debate where people are likely to use hostage taking as a tactic. And who is likely to use it as a tactic? Mainly non-state groups. Because let us try to understand. States are parties to stuff like the Hostages Convention and War Crimes and ICC statute, which prohibit the taking of hostage taking. So more likely, it is going to be the non-state actors who are not willing to negotiate with parties like Sushma Swaraj, who will not have a very real possibility of the soldier ever coming back. So therefore, this message will not be sent out that their life is not worth it. But thirdly, they tell you, not thinking, that there are alternatives like rescue missions and better preparations. Now, firstly, they don't tell you how likely it is that these will occur, because they simply hang one example of a George S.W. Bush who was rescued without telling you about the several hundreds others who could not be rescued. Because they tell you it's extremely unlikely that these rescue missions will be successful. Why, right? Firstly, the kind of captors, the captors who are underground and who are not likely to be non-state actors, they're not going to negotiate with you in prisoner of war agreements. They're not going to obey the International Convention of Treatment of Prisoners, right? Secondly, the low probability of rescue, because simply that you are holed up in a cave which is not available which is completely off the radar, right? And more importantly, let's talk about what kind of torture you're inflicted on and how it is going to affect you later when you do come back to life, right? All these factors mean that it's not enough for opening opposition to simply say that, well, we have the possibility of rescue and therefore we are okay with it. Finally, they tell you that the impact on the psyche of the killer is going to be great. But let's try to understand something. When faced with the situation of exposing your comrade to such an indignified and tortured life, we feel that the idea would be similar to that of euthanasia, a mercy killing. And we won't feel, and that this idea is very prominent amongst army men, that the idea that I want to die an honorable death in the battlefield. We don't believe that this is going to interfere with that sentiment and going to be that grave and impact on the killer, right? But let me come to our 3 extension points, right? Firstly, what is the metric for making this evaluation? the idea of a society which has accepted war as an inevitable event means that there is some sacrifice to make in order to increase the security and safety of the collective, right? And this is apparent in what a soldier is told the first time that he enters into any army. Now we also tell you that the captured soldier cannot be made a relevant determinant, because, Mr. Speaker, you can be given arguments from one side saying that, okay, a life with torture is better than a life with a possibility at the end of it of release, but another side can come and tell you that no, the indignity of torture is too great. We believe that it's a very subjective determination which should not influence the result of this debate, simply because it is not possible to resolve it. Both situations are equally worse, right? But before I go on to tell you why, given that we told you that the soldier should not be a relevant determinant in making this evaluation, I'll take over. Yeah.
Why don't you give the soldier a cyanide tablet to bite onto if the torture gets really too brutal?
Because
Why must the state
because we believe that in several situations it's not possible for the soldier to consume the cyanide tablet himself, right? So when you are shot and you are already injured and the enemy captor comes and takes you away, you may not have the opportunity to take the cyanide tablet. This places on the onus of the party who can effectively do this particular act. And why is that important? Let's talk about the strategic interest. The opening government simply came and told you that we need to protect information. But why is that information relevant in the context of the metric that we gave you? Because this information can have significant pernicious consequences in terms of revealing, say, the arrangement of battalions and their safe houses, which is basically now a question of whether putting the life of this one person at risk or putting the life of the entire battalion who is housed in that safe house as risk. The moment we change the metric to that, we observe that the choice becomes easier to make, right? But more importantly, let's talk about another way in which this hostage would be used, that is as a bargaining chip, where he is used in negotiations in either to free terrorists or as a propaganda move. Because let's try to understand, the biggest problem and the biggest actor who'd like to engage in tactics like hostage taking is someone like ISIS. And what has contributed to the popularity of this ISIS is the fact that they can capture hostages and behead them on television. The fact that they can dangle them before USA and say that, oh, do you want to negotiate with us? Well, too bad, we're going to kill them off, right? The fact that hostages are not simply going to be used as a repository of information, but as a bargaining chip, as a publicity stunt, means that there's significant strategic consequences that flow out of not going by this move. For all these reasons, we're very proud.
I thank the speaker for his speech and invite the member of opposition to open the debate and closing the motion. Hear, hear.
We think that hostage taking is a strategic, psychological warfare tactic. On our side of the house, we shall argue to you how eliminating such strategic and psychological warfare tactics increases the possibility of direct, arbitrary and escalated conflict, which is something that we have a problem with. Firstly, on the idea of what are the aims of taking in hostages, right? We agree with, we think there's a general consensus in the room that first of all, it's to extract a certain kind of information, and secondly, it's to get a certain amount of bargaining chip or leverage for certain concessions from the oppressing group, right? We also go ahead and argue to you that these techniques, we think, are by default working to a certain extent, which is why hostage taking has been a tactic in this particular area. Like, these techniques have yielded certain results, and therefore we tell you that we want these kinds of techniques to exist in status quo. Now let's really understand that what is the psychology of opposing war groups. We think that opposing war groups at all points in time want certain demands of theirs to be met. At the same time, they want these demands to be met at the lowest cost possible. Right? This lowest cost in terms of life and resources. Right? So we tell you that the initial aim of every group is to make those demands met at the cost of spending as less resources and as less lives possible, which makes them resort to tactics such as hostage taking, because they think that they can go ahead and extract direct concessions instead of going ahead and actually waging a war for them to go ahead and say, for instance, get a piece of land. Right? Or that at a point in time where I can simply take hostage of 10 people and I can get that piece of land, I don't really have to go ahead and fight a full 7-day war in order to obtain the same land. We tell you that psychology is something that war groups put into implementation and is a psychology that we think needs to be respected, because in the absence of it, the possibility of conflict escalates. Right? What happens when you allow this sort of a policy to pass where soldiers kill their comrades who can be abducted? Right? First of all, we tell you by a simple logical deduction, the number of abductions go down, right? Because if I as a warring group know that any soldier who I can possibly abduct is anyway going to be shot down, I know that I don't have that kind of a leverage where I can abduct people and extract information, where I can go ahead and get certain tactical concessions from the oppressor or from the warring majority. Right? So at this point in time, when I know that my kidnapping is something that is not going to feasibly materialize into anything because this person is going to get shot down, what I now realize is that there is no way for me to go ahead and extract the certain concessions that I want in status quo. Which is to say, if I am a minority, a warring minority that is being oppressed and I have certain demands, I know that now I don't have the option of abducting this person. I will have to resort to certain other tactics in order to make these demands of mine met. Which is exactly where we go ahead and begin with our case, and we take down opening government simultaneously. They come up here and say that these abductions are mostly conducted by non-state actors against state military. We tell you that these non-state actors, in most circumstances, think that they've been oppressed by the state, think that their demands aren't being met, which is what has gone ahead and led to them forming, say for instance, a rebel group which is warring with the state in status quo. We tell you that when you go ahead and eliminate the possibility of extracting concessions through hostage taking, it's not as if the rebel group suddenly backs down or suddenly gives up their contest. We tell you that in this scenario, the rebel group is much more likely to get radicalized because they think that you've eliminated the moderate way for them to go ahead and extract concessions. What you've done is you've forced them to go ahead and resort to more arbitrary, more direct, more escalated forms of conflict to go ahead and achieve the same means as before, which we tell you is a problem, right? So we tell you that at a point in time where this rebel group is likely to resort to any means necessary in order to make certain demands of theirs met, they have either of the two options. Either they engage in strategic mitigated conflict or they engage in aggressive direct conflict. We tell you that on their side of the house, it is much more likely that this non-state actor is likely to resort to direct and aggressive conflict instead of this mitigated conflict, because you've eliminated that possibility. I think.
Yes. So it's not an either or situation. Non-state actors in status quo take hostages, but they also bomb civilian villages and they also kill state soldiers. Please qualify why this conflict is going to increase substantially when there is no hostage taking.
Yeah, because we think that the idea of hostage taking means that there's a moderate way in which I can get the state to go ahead and give certain concessions to me, right? In the absence of that moderate way, we think you're bound to resort to the radical way of going about and doing the same thing, right? Let me give you an example with regard to Japan and America during the Second World War, right? Where we think that America could have simply gone ahead and used a moderate tactic of not prosecuting Hirohito, who was the Japanese emperor, right? But we think by virtue of the fact that they thought that this tactic is not going to lead to anything, they had to resort to dropping those bombs, right? We think the moment the moderate tactic is something that you think is no longer an option, you are bound to resort to a more aggressive form of violence, and that we tell you is a problem, right? So let me give you another example, right? At a point in time where there is a dispute over a certain territory, right? A certain part of a territory, this group has two options, right, to reclaim that territory. Either they take 10 soldiers, hold them hostages, and then go ahead and ask the government to bargain with them, or they go ahead and simply fight a direct war with the government. We tell you that by virtue of the fact that that war entails loss of life and is greater damage to, greater collateral damage for everyone, we think that's a bad way for society to run as such. More importantly, we also seek to run an analytical extension to the idea of what is the impact that it has on armies. Right? So we tell you that obviously the message that you go ahead and send to the army is that the value of life of your comrade in a certain situation can be compromised, right? Which is something these guys hinted towards, but they did really tell you what happens as a tangible consequence of that. Right? We tell you that armies by default work on the precedent of sacrifice. Right? They work on the idea of me going to have to share my resources with this comrade at a point in time where there's a crisis of resources, at a point in time where both of our lives are at stake, right? At a point in time where this side of the house goes ahead and runs a narrative that says that it is okay for you to stake the life of your comrade, or you can go ahead and actively prioritize your own security over the life of your comrade. We tell you the precedent it sets within the army is that sharing, is that in situations of crisis, it is okay for you to go ahead and compromise with other members of the army, which we tell you leads to a more fractured army, and that we tell you, like, if that is the idea that they didn't want to run with, is something that is coming as a consequential harm on their part of the house. What do we then tell you? We argue to you the importance of governments making small concessions to these non-state actors, right? Because we think that these small concessions are exactly what lead to a certain kind of engagement between the two parties, which prevents direct collateral damage in the larger run. Like, we tell you that this engagement is something that we advocate, and that engagement is facilitated by hostage taking. Thank you.
Thank the speaker for his speech, and invite the final speaker on the government witness. Here.
Side opposition as a whole has been extremely snug and vivid in this debate, right? Where they argue about the state's moral obligation, where they talk about the sanity and the mental framework of the person shooting, but quietly avoid the trauma and the entire change in mind that the person shot or the person to be captured undergoes, right? Ritvik analyzed that for you. I'll put it into context in this debate. But let's deal with CO first, right? We get two very interesting perspectives from them. The first one is that they tell you that the possibility of direct conflict increases, and as a consequence of that, the number of abductions go down, and therefore direct conflict becomes the only consequence. We tell you we don't have a problem with that, right? For two reasons. First, we're completely okay with the number of abductions going down because that's what we seek to achieve on this side of the house, right? We think that once the non-state actors realize that hostage tactics just don't give them the same leverage anymore, they stop using those tactics, we stop losing soldiers to that, and we see that as a consequence on our side of the house. But secondly, more importantly, right, that entire argument is predicated on the assumption that direct conflict is bad, but he never proves that to you. On the other hand, we tell you that direct conflict is actually better, because on this side of the house, the only thing that brings state armies down is guerrilla warfare, right? Is warfare which uses insidious means, which isn't direct. So we tell you, when an army is faced with direct conflict, which they are trained for, which they're better equipped for, it's actually better on our side of the house. We see CO taking a fourth, right? But lastly, they carry forward from more this entire idea about the precedent you've set within the army, right? About how the military commander doesn't put enough people into infiltration, about how the entire army structure changes, right? We're okay with that. On our side of the house, the consequence to that is that the incentive structures in both the non-state actors and the armies change, right? And I'll analyze that for you. But first, let's deal with O, right? First, they tell you the entire idea of prepare them better and guard battalions better, right? And this is my POI to support, for which he gave a really simple response. He said, show them the effects of waterboarding, show them the effects of death, and they'll be better prepared. Mr. Speaker, pain isn't something that can be taught unless you put them through the same experience, right? We see no logic in the argument that they're giving you, right? Because let's try to understand what's going to happen. You can explain to a soldier that you will be put underwater and it's going to be, and you're going to feel like you're drowning, right? But he won't be as prepared because before that he will be starved for days, right? Then it's not like one tactic works at the same time, and it's never quite so simple as just showing effects, right? We think that dismissing our arguments and all the analysis that they gave you by just saying that you can show them the effects of it and be done with that, right? Secondly, they talk to you about how you should guard battalions better, and therefore that's going to take away from all these hostage abductions, right? We tell you that's not how it works. Just we characterize this for you, right? If you could simply guard battalions better, and if you could simply just improve your security and be done with the problem, hostage abductions and all of that stuff wouldn't be such a huge problem, right? It's what they're talking to you about, and when Osho gives you that alternative, that's the status quo. That's what's not working. That's not the alternative solution to the issue that we're discussing here, right? And again, the idea of rehabilitation, right? Two responses. First, if you tell me that you will rehabilitate them when they come back, that applies equally to the person shooting. On the other hand, we think that the person shooting is better, can be rehabilitated much better, because the burden on his mind is shooting someone he knew. The burden on the mind of a prisoner of war is tons and months of mental trauma, of insidious brainwashing, of changing faith, right? Because what did people do in Iraq to American prisoners of war? What is Homeland about, right? The idea that you can brainwash a soldier completely through using these sort of tactics, right? That's something that they completely ignored. We think that rehabilitation is something that falls on our side of the house. It's not something that they can get away with, right? But notice how they tell you, and this is where the psychological state of the person coming back is really, really important, right? Two responses. First, we tell you that the likelihood of them coming back is really, really small. Because when Ritwik talks to you about a bargaining chip, it's important to understand in the context of the debate. When does a prisoner of war come back, right? And this is something OG ignored because they were too centered into the idea of a state conflict. When does the prisoner of war come back? When the country gives the non-state actor a sufficient leverage, right? A big enough terrorist. If the terrorist is not big enough, he will not come back. Which means a soldier who doesn't know anything, America will likely sacrifice, right? They're okay with never getting him back. They're okay with him dying, right? But secondly, more importantly, what happens to him once he does come back, right? We don't think that waterboarding and pulling out nails is the only thing that happens. The physical tactics that are used, but the more importantly are the mental tactics, the brainwashing that they go through, right? The idea that your framework is completely messed, that you don't know how to live your life normally anymore. Mr. Speaker, soldiers commit suicide because of the effects of PTSD all the time. We see this as a likelihood. We don't see the trauma and the indignity of the life stopping at once you're in that particular den, right? We see the consequences continuing when you come back to America after having been a prisoner of war for 2 years. It doesn't stop just there, right? So if you're going to make this debate, about this entire balance between is it good to give them a quick death, or is it good to stay with the likelihood of them coming back? Right, like we said, that's a mood clash because you can't really define how a person is going to behave. The determinant in this debate has to be the consequences it has for the collective on a whole, right? Because we know the person is going to be affected in both paradigms. We can't argue with that. What you have to look for is the changes happening on both sides. On their side of the house, they argue to you that, okay, make guard them better. On our side of the house, we told you that A, using CEO's point, abductions are actually going to go down. Secondly, more importantly, army structures change, right? And the entire mentality of the soldier still remains the same. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is where you enter the morality of this debate, right? Ritwik spoke to you about the motivations that a person has going into the army. Why is this relevant and why is he relevant to this debate? Because what he told you is what they equipped it is this mentality that I will die or I might never come back home. You'll find that most soldiers might actually be okay with dying at the hands of their friends as opposed to months of torture and dying at the hands of the Iraqis, right? We think that's something that has to be considered in this debate. The analogy that I will draw for you as government whip is think of euthanasia, right? Think of the idea of a quick death. But Mr. Speaker, most importantly, what is euthanasia, right? It's a last resort. It's not fair for him to place the burden on us to show you that rescue missions are never possible. Because when they talk to you about the bonds within the army, we think they're strong enough that the soldiers will do everything in their power to get him back up until the point that he's in the enemy camp. Right? That's when it stops. We think that's when they're going to shoot him. They're not going to give up on him so easily. We think of it as a quick, painless death. We think of it as a mercy death. And we're okay with any sort of trade-off we might have to make. We're extremely proud to do this.
I thank the speaker for her speech and invite the final speaker of the debate, the opposition whip. Here. Guys. Excuse me.
Members of the House, the moment CG goes ahead and concedes that abductions will necessarily go low, which also by extension proves our point that this kind of lack of less abductions will lead to more direct engagement, because they didn't engage with why it won't lead to direct engagement. We tell you that this debate becomes a binary between collateral damage and abductions. We prefer abductions, we prefer strategic warfare, right? What do we tell you that is the first thing that you need to understand, and this is where I take the entire CG case down. The first thing is that they don't prove to you why direct conflict won't happen. They say even if direct conflict happens, we are fine with it. We say that it's absolutely ridiculous for them to say that, because direct conflict does not only necessarily go to only the army. Even if we are to consider that army men have no value of life, if we take them at their best, we feel that a direct conflict will necessarily always percolate into the normal citizens, more in the case of non-state actors, because they don't have to abide by things like conventions of the war crimes, right? They'll necessarily go ahead and burn civilians and stuff, and they'll go ahead and engage with direct conflict. And this is where Shreya's POI in the last speech actually plays into our favor, where ISIS actually goes ahead and burns civilians because they don't have to live up to any sort of convention, right? We feel that this is the kind of population that happens. But in principle, and it's sad that I have to dump it down to this level, why is direct conflict bad, right? We feel that direct conflict, and this is the first question we answer to you in this debate that you need to adjudicate this debate on, right? We feel direct conflict is bad because A, there is collateral damage by extension, which is greater loss of state resources and greater loss of life of the army men and the civilians, which also is an analytical extension of what the O said about how army men's life is also valuable, right? We feel that this kind of extension is necessary, where they don't tell us that why is army men's life not valuable just by virtue of them consenting to go ahead and sign up for the army. We feel that every job has that kind of trade-off, but every job also has this kind of job security for the greater purposes of life, right? Something that they don't prove to you. Anyway, like the second idea is, this is what we feel is very sadly agreed upon by the government bench, is like torture is a lot miserable, and no life is better. We tell you that they haven't proven to you at any point in time why indispensable pain is something that is so bad for this argument that he shouldn't have a life at all, right? We feel that a life is still better, a life of any way is still better than no life. That's why you have things like all these army men who go to things like Paralympic sports and stuff, because you do think that these army men can have a life, right? We feel that this is the kind of thing that they are trying to say, that the moment he goes to torture, the moment there is some sort of torture, there is no value to life. We feel that's absolutely ridiculous, because that also sets a precedent where in a scenario you are in a war zone, where you are in a war zone and a very critical war situation is going on, and your comrade has been shot in the chest. What you'll do is you'll shoot two more bullets in his chest, because you know what, torture is bad, no life is better than what, this person should have a life in the first place. Nobody will be able to rescue him. He dies, right? Now the first question that they talk about is what are the greater responsibilities of the army, and this is where it becomes a direct relevance to our case. The direct relevance to our case is the very idea that no army actually wants to go to war is something that we build our case on, right? We feel that the possibility of actual warfare happening, and this is what Path extensively talks to you about, not engaged with CG, the idea of how you want to avoid actual warfare as an army. We feel that these abductions lead to small engagements, and we'll tell you why. This kind of idea that even if we take them at their best, we feel that this concession is not a concession that you will give up your entire entire state and the war will be over because one soldier is gone. We feel that this kind of abduction lead to very small concessions, which lead to very small engagement between these two parties. What does this small engagement lead to? This small engagement leads to lack of direct conflict because they both have certain amount of touch with each other in terms of what they want and in terms of how they want to negotiate about it. We feel that this kind of knowledge about the negotiation chip and the bargaining chips is extremely important to know about the objectives and also to avoid actual warfare, because in the lack of this they'll go ahead and actually kill citizens, right? And we tell you that in the scenario where direct conflict happens, it will be far worse off. Examples being the examples of how Tamil Tigers and Sinhalese conflicts in Sri Lanka actually percolated to the civilians, where they went out killing civilians, arsoning property, and all these things, right? We feel that that's bad in their scenario. Now, the second idea is what is an analytical extension on our part, is the idea of the consequences of this move in terms of what the army wants is to maintain unity, right? We feel that this maintaining of unity is extremely important, because even if we take government as their best, that you will give them psychological training, and this is psychological training, and now they'll be conditioned that, you know what, it's okay for me to kill my friend, which negates Over's case slightly, but even if we concede that, you know, they will be psychologically trained that it's okay to kill my friend, we feel that goes ahead and compromises on the unity of the army, because they have to stay in crisis situations where their unity is the only motivation for them to go ahead and fight that war. We'll tell you, in times of crisis, where there are food crisis, shelter crisis in war zones, what they'll resort to is killing of this one person, because there is only this one place to sleep and only one of them can sleep on it. He'll go ahead and kill this other person because the inherent value of his life has been decreased in the eyes of his comrade, because he's been psychologically trained that you can go ahead and kill your comrade at any point in time you like. The food crisis guy.
Oji told you that areas of hostage taking anyway damaging direct engagement takes place in status quo. In such a scenario, why is it not okay for abductions to go down, given that radical warfare can't get any worse than it already has?
Members of the House, we tell you that on a very principle level, it acts as a mitigation of this kind of radical warfare, and this kind of radical warfare even exists. We tell you, even if it exists, it will go ahead and mitigate it, and if it doesn't exist, it will go ahead and radicalize it. We feel it's extremely ridiculous of them to say that, you know, radicalization has this upper limit, and this is the limit of radicalization that can happen. We tell you that terrorist organizations can already go ahead and kill more people than they actually are. We don't see how that's relevant. In terms of food crisis, we feel that when things like food crisis happen, army men will resort to things like cannibalism and stuff, because no inherent value of life. We tell you these are the major harms that we give to you, but what more importantly, and they say that bargaining chip is a concession on our part. We tell you that bargaining chip is exactly what we want, because for all the reasons we've already told you, right? OG what tells you is they will die anyway. We feel that's a very nihilistic view of what their life is about and stuff, and we don't want to engage with that anymore. But largely, what is the trade-off? We feel that the trade-off is larger consequences, harms for the army in the future, lack of indirect engagement, and lack of collateral damage. We always prefer lack of collateral damage. We feel we win this debate, proud to stand as opposition.